Hello and welcome to Deep in Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into our both most second work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we are back to talk about Collateral 4.4. So Blake has been usurped into doing 3 trials, and we basically pick up right after he and Rose have just gotten home. Maybe there's been a few hours of...
yeah, I got the impression
he
got to take a nap, and Rose did some reading because she's back in the mirror world, so she doesn't need to sleep. So that's that's a positive of this whole situation.
Yep. So Blake kind of wakes up and gets dressed, and we get this interesting set of beats of Blake just being unable to get comfortable. He kind of realizes he has to wear clothes that he needs for like utility purposes, but he feels really uncomfortable about the kind of aesthetics of them. It's an interesting scene where he's just kind of struggling to get dressed.
Yeah. This is something I loved from Worm. I know we're not meant to talk about that too much here, but I'm glad to see it pop up again in Pact. Just these little details of how people sort of kit up. Like there was a lot of detail paid. There was a lot of attention paid to that in Worm, and I'm loving seeing it here as well, because it's something I think a lot of stories gloss over, is people putting together, their kit for potentially any number of situations. Like, Blake gets some of the hair that's trying to grow into his skin, and inks it up as an like emergency glamour kit. He's got like some little knives and stuff. It makes sense.
See him. We get to see him use his like handyman skills to kind of leather craft himself a strap to holster June against his leg, which is very fun.
So I mean, by the end of it, he's kind of cosplaying as Lara Croft. Is my essential understanding of what's happened by the end of this. But no, it's cool. Like, he's got himself a pretty sweet setup, and I guess we'll get to see how that performs as things move forward.
Yeah, you do get to see him a bit in his element. I mean, he's uncomfortable with some of the clothes, but the kind of putting together a utility belt thing for June is a little bit of him kind of flexing. It's nice. While he finishes getting dressed, Rose kind of feeds him information that she's been able to find in her nighttime researches. Specifically, she talks about motes, kind of as these like little baby devil things, the sparks to the fire that is a devil, I suppose. And so as we sort of get more info on them, they're sort of related to what the Briar Girl was talking about an arc ago, like these these mini demons that the main ones send out and just sort of cause wreckage, and there's a slight difference between imps and motes, but the basic idea of motes is very much what I was sort of getting from what the Briar Girl was talking about, where it's just, the main demon unleashes all of these just little nasties, these gremlins type things. They kind of just fuck shit up in smaller ways.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of get into that, because this imp that we eventually meet at the end of this chapter seems to be getting a bit beyond what Briar Girl mentioned of like lights or things turning off at pivotal moments and stuff like that. But I guess we'll get to that a bit later.
Yeah, well, it seems like they tend to sort of fit into 2 categories. You've either got the ones who are sort of working for an actual demon, and they sort of have a goal and they expend themselves that way. And then you get the other ones, which I guess are just more random, and they're just like general directionless pieces of shit.
Just pointless hate. So while Blake and Rose are talking, Joel kind of knocks at the door, and he's clearly concerned about Blake's mental health.
Fair.
Which, we kind of discussed a bit during the party part of 4.1. And Blake basically reassures him that he has nothing to worry about, and Joel kind of goes for this. This is an interesting little beat. It just kind of... It doesn't seem to slot into the arc of this chapter as a whole that much, but I think it's a nice little way of just making sure that we keep in the back of our mind that Blake has these friends as his like touchstone.
Yeah, well, this is very much... we're starting to see the cracks that will inevitably start to form as he's keeping this whole life a secret. Like, you can't maintain these sort of close friendships. Like, they're basically like, hey, we want to back you up. And Blake sort of has to tell them no, because he doesn't want them embroiled in it, which, of course, because of the relationship he has with these people, Joel's is, like, not up for that at all. And then also...
They don't seem to like that.
And then Blake won't actually tell them anything. So the whole sort of situation is just, it's kind of rough for Joel, and I think we're starting to see that this double life is going to start to affect his old life, basically.
Yeah, it must be so frustrating to be in that situation where they're basically just saying to you, "No, shit's bad for me, but I can't tell you why, and you can't help."
That's very understandably annoying.
Yeah. So while Joel and Blake are talking, Fell turns up at the door. Turns out he has a name after all. And he's basically here to give Blake more information on the 3 trials that he has to undertake. The first one being due tonight.
Yes. I'm loving Fell. I love this bit where Blake basically is like, hey Joel, if I turn up dead, it was probably this guy, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Fell seems to specifically be a master of dampening or destroying connections. More so than generic manipulating that we've seen from the Duchamps.
I like this part where he just kind of easily cuts that connection, because it's a great setup for for a part later on where Fell really goes dark, and it kind of is very cool. Fell and Blake kind of get into an argument, and Fell basically says, "I could just leave you dead on the floor here and make it so that no one would notice, and you would just rot here for the animals to eat." It's like, fuck, that's pretty grim.
I think I might be a terrible person because I read that and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I can't. I like Fell in that sort of he's kind of this mysterious person that I obviously hate, so I find him kind of fascinating, I guess. I'm so interested to see more of him. He? Yeah.
So Fell kind of gives them some news on the 3 trials. The first one, the kind of imp that we discussed earlier, there's a guy called C. Doubt who is possessed by an imp. I mean, possessed isn't the right word, but for all intents and purposes, possessed. Yeah. Stray animals have been gathering around him, and while he doesn't seem that powerful, he's kind of become enough of a pain in the ass that Conquest thinks it's time to deal with him.
Yeah, well, so one of the interesting details, if I'm interpreting this right, it sounds like this imp sort of starts to gain strength in an area or a host, and then as it's sort of getting powerful enough to the point where it would be a problem, it's bailing and taking a new host and sort of starting again. And so it seems like it's all sort of been in this area, but it seems to be resisting growing too powerful, which is interesting. That suggests to me probably that it's more in this category of something working for someone else that has a specific goal. But it'd be very interesting. I feel like this is important.
Yeah, Rose kind of picks up on some of these clues as well and starts thinking, oh, this sounds like it's an imp. It sounds like there's actually some kind of motive here, and it's not just random nonsense. And we get to see Rose kind of in her element here. Blake before was in his element with the handyman stuff, and Rose here is the gal in the chair, researching, diagnosing what this thing is, and putting it into a bit of a box, which Blake kind of calls out as being helpful in his internal monologue when kind of dealing with others.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he sort of says that it's important to know your enemy and their motivations to sort of know how to tackle them. Just through putting them in a box, I think, is something we've specifically been told is dangerous to do with little information.
True.
But I think the point of trying to figure out their motivations is something that Blake has already clued into is a very effective strategy, and it makes sense.
Yeah. The second of the 3 trials is an abstract entity that lives in an abandoned factory. And we basically get the story that this group of practitioners called the Knights of the Basement organize scouting trips to scout out nearby areas. Yeah, it's a great name. And they started noticing that somewhere that they should have already have scheduled scouted out, they never actually did. And this confused them until they basically surmised, oh shit, we actually did send people to check this out, but they died and all memory and record of them has been erased, which is fucking terrifying.
Yeah, this is some sort of demon that doesn't just erase you, but erases you from time. This is some Doctor Who shit right here. And I'm very excited to see the rest of it.
Yeah. And it's worth pointing out, this is a minor thing that's not really worth Conquest actually sending people he trusts to handle.
I guess because it's sitting still. But yeah, there's the point that this is considered a minor demon, but that's pretty fucking terrifying what it can do. I would save this one for last if I was Blake.
Yeah. So next up, the third trial is a goblin. A goblin called the Hyena. That is a very strong goblin that basically has developed this MO of eating spirits and others, or mostly eating them, leaving kind of parts of them half-eaten around its living quarters, and they'll just kind of head out and lash out and fuck with shit that comes near. So that's fun.
Yeah, it's like Barbatorum, but for spirits and others. It's cool. Yeah, Hyena sounds awful. I'm excited.
They all sound pretty rough, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, the imp is probably the one that seems the least awful, but then we actually see it later in this chapter, and it's like horrifying.
Oh, it's kind of cute. Blake even says so.
Well, okay, sure. It's cute. You're right. I'm glad he dealt with the cute one first. So Blake kind of starts picking at Fel at this point. We kind of mentioned that they have an argument, and Blake gets frustrated that Conquest doesn't seem to want to actually like give them any resources, information, anything to help out with these tasks. And he starts getting pissed off at Fel by association.
Yeah, well, I mean, he and Fel already have a very bad relationship stemming from that original meeting where Fel kept undermining Blake's points, and Blake explicitly tells Rose that's why he is treating him like shit now. So Blake has not forgiven him.
Fair enough, I think.
Yeah, and also I think Blake's point, this whole thing is fair enough, is like he's basically saying, hey, Conquest, if you want me to survive these next 3 days so that I can do the other shit that you need me to do, could you like give me an inch? Like, you know, he's just, it seems like a very reasonable thing, and he phrases it very subserviently at the end. Which I think makes it even more reasonable. Yeah, but you know, I'm totally on Blake's side here, but I guess that's what it's like dealing with Conquest.
Yeah, no, it seems like it would be a nightmare. So Fel eventually agrees to kind of go talk to Conquest about this, and Blake and Rose head off and take a train to scout out the imp. Yeah, they take a train over. It's such a little, like, it's so mundane, and they're just like, there's other people on the train, and it's just like a weird little mundane train scene. It's awesome.
Well, yeah, except Blake has Blake really tenses up when they get to the point where the train is crowded, and so there's like a press of bodies, and he sort of corners himself and sticks his knee out so that people can't really get in his personal space. So, you know, it's not that mundane for Blake, really.
Blake, yeah, you're right.
Seems pretty stressful.
There's this other weird beat on the train where somebody mistakes Blake for a girl, or Blake thinks maybe they saw Rose in the reflection, and it's just this weird little beat. I'm curious what your read on it was, Elliot.
Yeah, I did sort of get the sense that we're meant to just sort of be like, oh, you know, he looked up into the sort of the train door and saw the reflection, and then was a bit confused, but then, like, that doesn't really add up as well, I don't think. Like, can all muggles just see Rose? Because then people would have noticed already. Like, I spend half the time I'm on the train usually staring at the, like, door. I feel like that's maybe something I would have noticed.
Yeah, or even if they don't have a reflection, which we know Blake doesn't.
Yeah, so I'm a little confused as to what normal people see with Blake's whole situation. Like, I think it's been pretty clear that practitioners, or at least through the site, you can see Rose. But yeah, I mean, my initial thought was that maybe this was some other or something, because, you know, they get Blake's whole gender situation muddled with Rose in the mix. But then Blake seems pretty confident it's not that, so unless it's like someone in glamour or something, I don't really know what to make of it, unless putting my tinfoil on and saying something to do with this transference. Like when he got bumped, you know, maybe that sort of kicked things over for a second. Yeah,
and there's another beat where it seems that the Briar girl is spying on Blake.
Yes.
Or that's the conclusion that Blake seems to come to when he sees a pigeon acting weirdly. He would be so paranoid about this stuff. But,
well, I think he specifically sees a connection heading really far away in the direction of Jacob's Bell.
It's true.
I think if anybody was going to be spying on you with a pigeon, I'd say Briar Girl's a solid bet. Like, we've seen her do that before.
Yeah, I like how there's just a few beats of this mundane train journey being so weird because
Yeah.
of just who the world that Blake is in now.
Yeah.
Anyway, Blake and Rose arrive at the neighborhood for this house, and it's wrong. There are animals acting very weirdly, dozens of crows watching people. All the people who live here seem afraid. Blake kind of has a little conversation with some of them, and they reveal that some mice attacked a baby in a stroller and all this weird shit. Yeah, it's all just gone wrong.
Yeah, well, because the whole area, it's set up as this really fancy, like, upper middle class suburb that's just completely and seemingly quickly just gone to shit. But also, no one's like leaving it, or like it's not turning into a bad neighborhood. It's like a good neighborhood that's just is currently bad. Like it's very off, and I'm getting an idea a bit, I think, of what the Briar Girl was talking about, where like in normal others, like, you know, we're sort of seeing when goblins get into a place, they just turn it into a shithole in a way that you'd sort of think of like a bad neighborhood. Like, you know, they turn it into somewhere that you wouldn't want to be. Whereas when devils or demons are involved, it's like they can't even mess things up in the right way. Like, they mess it up in this way that feels fundamentally wrong. It's just that bit different. It's like the whole death thing where, you know, there's like a natural order for things to go downhill, and they don't even follow that. They take things downhill in the wrong way. Yeah,
we get explicit like discussion of the natural order when Rose makes a Macbeth reference, talking about how the natural order should be like humans having dominance over animals, right, in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
But this place seems to have subverted that so that these animals are now kind of the dominant creatures and humans are just on their space.
Yeah. It's an interesting sort of reference to make, but it seems to hold up so far.
Yeah. So Blake and Rose head over to this house, and Blake gets attacked by a rabbit, which he then proceeds to kick to death and gut, and use those guts to ward off a flock of crows which start diving him. No, sorry, I shouldn't say a flock. A murder of crows. Let's call it what it is. He like squeezes out like a tube of toothpaste, some guts and blood in a circle around themselves. It's very gross.
Hey, so what form does the Briar Girl's familiar take when it's not in its actual form?
I mean, yeah, it's a rabbit, right? So, maybe Blake's just dealt a pretty strong blow here.
I know. I'm sure it's not that thing. But I just, after we had that little pigeon watching him that was presumably the Briar Girl, and then we have this. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And may never come back as a form of foreshadowing, perhaps. Also,
you think Blake's gonna curb stomp the Briar Girl? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be down. I'd be down for that. Also, today I learnt that rabbits scream. That was what I learnt from Pact today, and also that the easy way to gut a rabbit.
Yeah, I mean, who says that these stories can't be entertaining and horrifying and educational? So Rose kind of calls out to this imp who waddles over. He's like 60 centimeters tall. He looks like a baby. Except creepy, like an Attack on Titan baby, I guess, is an apt description.
Yeah, that's a good description.
And he announces himself as Poos of the Fifth Choir, feral and foul, in a deeper voice that didn't fit his frame. So I imagine this kind of like baby waddling over and just kind of speaking in this very deep voice, which is I can see now why Blake would say it's cute.
Yeah, that's adorable. I'm sure this will all be fine.
Yeah, and so Rose basically, the chapter ends with Rose propositioning this imp to help take down a king.
I'm not going to lie.
So we can all infer what that means.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The first time I read this, I thought that she was talking to Blake. And the whole bit seemed like a real weird ending to me. And then the second time I read it, I came to the same conclusion you just came to, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes way more sense. Like, she's talking to the. And I think that part of the reason for that confusion was like I then went back to 4.3, and they pretty explicitly sort of said that they will try to capture these things and bring them to conquest. So
yeah,
I'm very interested to see if this is just some sort of ploy Rose is pulling, or if, you know, I went back and read the exact wording, and I don't really think I can see how turning this thing against conquest fulfills their end of the deal. So without earning them a bunch of negative karma.
Well, Well, let's be specific. Conquest said, I want each bound, captured, and brought to me, right? Those are the terms of the deal.
I guess he didn't specify what order. That doesn't specify the order.
That's true.
They could bring them all to him and then try and capture them while they're there.
Well, yeah. Capture them, bring them to him, set them loose on him, and then bind them afterwards.
I guess we'll see. It's going to be interesting there. I assumed when they were talking about turning everyone against Conquest, they meant Jeremy and Isadora and stuff, not the fucking devils that they're trying to fight.
Yeah, well, maybe it's easier to have a kind of enemy of my enemy is my friend thing. Although you don't really want to do that with devils and demons. It doesn't seem like a good idea.
No, I don't think they're ever your friends.
That's the end of Collateral 4.4 though.
Yeah,
it's interesting. This chapter kind of we have this interesting roller coaster of tension throughout this arc so far, right? Starts off very chill and relaxed, and then it ratchets up until 4.3, and then Blake and Rose kind of buy themselves some leniency, and we go down a bit. And now this feels like a kind of setup chapter for what's going to happen next in through this arc.
Yeah,
I really like the kind of flow of it. It feels like it has a really nice pace.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a bit of a loaded term in these stories, but it feels like an interlude between the action sequences.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's a loaded conversation talking about pacing in Pact at all, to be honest.
Fair. But anyway, yeah, no, I do agree. It's this... we sort of have now set up what is presumably most of the rest of this arc, which is Blake's 3 tasks. And now we're sort of... This was the setup to at least the first one, but yeah.
Yeah. So, we wanted to dive into some comments to see what people thought about this chapter 5 years ago when it first came out. I pulled one out here that I quite liked that was a comment thread started by a user called Eresh Kigala. And they kind of talk about the terms of the deal that they made with Conquest. So again, it was Conquest saying, yeah, I know, how relevant. Conquest said, I want each bound, captured, and brought to me. And then Rose says, we agree, obviously agreeing for both of them. And Eresh Kigala kind of brought up that they really just agreed to Conquest wanting this to happen. And that kind of leads into a discussion about the way that Conquest doesn't put much effort into his choice of words, and that this might be a potential avenue for attack. And thinking about this, I kind of came to the conclusion that Conquest isn't the kind of person that wants to, have solid binding contracts so much. He likes the fight. He likes breaking people. He put the chain around Rose. He's not too afraid that they're going to just, bail. And I really get the feeling he kind of wants them to try some of these loophole exploiting tricks so that he can just shut them down with excessive force.
Yeah, well, I guess I see that because we've seen of Conquest, obviously the concept of Conquest is tied into the transitive state of going from being in power to not being in power. And then I think we've also had mentioned that he also draws power from solidifying that conquest.
Yep.
So just having Blake and Rose beaten, and then I guess ordering them around, maybe that gets them a bit of power, but having them try and fight back and him just constantly beating them back down probably suits him a bit more. So, I could see that.
Yeah. I can imagine him leaving intentional loopholes in that he's already kind of thought about, well, if they do this, I'm just going to do this and beat the shit out of them or whatever it is, That will kind of feed into his cycle of power a lot more. I thought it was an interesting kind of discussion.
Yeah, definitely. And so I've pulled out sort of, a sort of series of comments. So the first one was sort of by the user called Unmaker, who points out that all the demons we've seen so far really disrupt or destroy natural forces. Barbatorum sort of seems to impact physical health and your soul. This sort of ambiguous demon thing in the factory that the Knights of the Basement have been fighting erases your history and your existence. The Knights of the Basement, they assume they actually lost members as they escaped from this demon, but they're not sure because they've been erased. So they don't know if they lost anyone.
Yep.
Then so how are we pronouncing this? Pause, Pows?
Poos is the pronunciation of this one.
Okay. Poos is sort of destroys the natural order. and then Orneus was sort of disrupting thermodynamics, basically. Was something added by a user named Lankmar. And then another user, Monsmel, kind of comes in and makes this link between karma as a sort of natural order, like not necessarily fair as a modern human might understand it, but there's this sense of the natural order of the universe, and then the demons are very opposed to it. They specifically break the natural order, and the perhaps Pact is ultimately exploring order versus chaos, which is an idea I really like.
Yeah. I thought this was a very interesting point, and I can't remember which user it was, but when I was reading through this comment thread, I noticed another comment in there which I really liked, which was basically saying, karma doesn't seem to be good versus evil, it's just kind of natural order, right? And so if that's the case, that would kind of explain why diabolists who kind of deal with these chaotic beasts get so much bad karma because they are upsetting the natural order. It's not that they're doing things evil, you know, it's just that they're bringing elements of chaos into the world.
Within the context of the Pact universe, the karma has decided what is right and wrong to an extent. Sort of morality aside, basically, there's a set of rules that karma has decided, or the universe and all the spirits have sort of decided that at the moment this is how things should work, and devils seem to disrupt that, and so as a diabolist, enabling them is not good. Yeah,
it gets you some real bad karma. Yeah, I really liked that idea. I'm interested to see more of the dichotomy of order versus chaos as the story continues.
It's something to keep in mind as we go forward, for sure.
Yeah. That's the end of the show. That's the end of us talking about Collateral 4.4. Now, a lot of people ask, hey, how can I help the show out? And here's an answer that we never usually give. Rate us on iTunes. Recently we've started being able to see ratings from outside of Australia because iTunes doesn't usually let you see those. We've found a way to do that, and turns out that there have been some good some fans of Deep Impact rating the show from across the sea. So do that. It's very helpful. It helps us be kind of found by new listeners. And helps get Wildbow stories to new ears, which I'm pretty sure is the number one goal of all fans of, Pact and Worm and all of Wildbow stories.
Yeah, yep, 100%. And, if you want more information on the show and the other shows on the Doof Network, head over to our website, doofmedia.com.
Yes, actually, on doofmedia.com at the moment you can check out something called March's Madness, which if you're familiar with Worm or Ward, you'll know the character March, who everyone in the fandom unanimously loves. Basically, the Doof crew has set up a kind of March Madness play where we get to face off different characters and find out who is the best character in Worm/Ward.
I think it's mostly Worm focused. You meant to mostly stick to Worm. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I think as this episode is releasing, round 1 is just finishing. So sorry if you're only finding out about that through here, but you can participate in the next round because there's going to be a lot more than one round.
Who's your top pick, Elliot? Who are you picking to win March's Madness?
Well, are you asking who I want to win or who I think will win? Because those are very different answers.
Let's do both. Who do you want to win and who do you think will win?
Well, I want Amy to win. I'll always stick up for my girl. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Which is why I have different answers. I think Tattletale's a pretty solid bet for the ultimate winner, but we'll see.
I want Miss Militia to win, and I think she's in with a chance of doing pretty well.
She's got better odds than Amy.
She's up against Gru. She's up against Gru in round 1, which is a tough one. I think you're right. Tattletale's a good pick. Bitch, Hellhound, Rachel, another top pick, I reckon. And of course, Dragon and Jessica Yamada, who are the darlings of the fandom.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to know what the hell we're talking about, you should check out doofmedia.com and see March's Madness.
Yes. And if you want to support us and the rest of the Doof Media Network so you can get cool things like March's Madness, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yes, and from Patreon you can also find Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/wildbow, and you can support more of these awesome stories being made, which you should do, because then we'll get more cool stories and it'll be rad.
And so apart from that, if you want to chat to us about the episode and give us your thoughts on 4.4, head over to the discussion thread that'll be in the show notes below this episode.
Yep. I think that's everything. Check out that discussion thread and you can leave us thoughts on this episode, and we will catch back up for Collateral 4.5 in a few days on Friday, the 15th of March.
See ya.
See you then.